Hello, welcome to my first ever YouTube video. Today I'm going to show you how I edited this photo from start to finish. This is done outside in natural light. There's nothing used except for the sun. It was actually a cloudy day, so it's pretty diffuse lighting. No reflector, just a camera and the model. So I'm going to show you how I do it from start to finish. So that includes importing it into Photoshop from RAW, which I always shoot in. I think you should always shoot in RAW, especially if you're just learning. But even if you're advanced, you should probably be shooting in RAW just because it gives you more freedom to fix things in your photo that you might want to fix in post. So it just makes it a lot easier and a lot faster to do a bunch of photos at once. So I'm going to show you first how I import that. So this would be the final project. I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit more. I use the frequency separation technique. I think it gives the most realistic skin retouching. As you can still see she has pores. It doesn't look like her face is plastic. So that's why I like the frequency separation technique. So, and that's it zoomed out. So I'm going to go ahead and open my file. I saved it on the desktop. I don't have a lot of free space on this computer anymore. I use a hard drive, so I just have this one saved. So I'm going to open that. So this is what it looks like when you open it in RAW in Photoshop. So as you can see, you have a lot of options here, and I really like using these. So the first thing I do always, first I go through and select which photos I want, and then I fix the exposure. This one's actually exposed okay, so I might increase it just a little bit, but I don't want to blow out the white areas here, so I'm just going to be careful not to do that. I usually leave the contrast alone. Sometimes if the highlights, like if I'm shooting backlit, you can toggle the highlights up and down. And it's a nice way to get some detail back in the light colors, like the shirt. I don't know if you can see that. I'll go back to 0. So I would just look here for a second. When I toggle it down, you get a little more detail, but you're leaving alone the shadows over here. You can also increase the shadows if you want. These little blue lines or little dots here indicate that this is completely in shadow. So I'm just going to increase the shadows a little bit, like that. I don't really want all of this detail to come back anyway, since it's dark parts in her hair. Her hair is really dark, so I'm not too worried about that. And then I'm not really going to touch this right now. Clarity, sometimes I increase it just a little bit, but her eyes are pretty tack sharp, so I don't really want to increase the clarity too much. As you can see, it's already quite sharp. It's actually so sharp you can kind of see where her eyelashes are attached, so I'm only going to increase the clarity to like +5, and I usually don't touch the vibrance or the saturation. And then the last thing I like to do is the color temperature. It's pretty cool, but it's a winter shot, so I don't think I'm gonna mess around with that at all. I'm just gonna keep it as shot. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to click Open Image. And my computer's thinking because it's a little bit slow. It's so bogged down with all my files and stuff. So the first thing I do, because sometimes I forget and then I get kind of angry at myself later, is I crop it to 5 by 7. All my photos are 5 by 7. I like to keep them all the same crop. It looks nicer when you get it into your portfolio when they're all the same. So I'm just going to crop it how I want it first. I don't know why this is always the first thing I do. Alright, so now that I have my photo and it's open, I'm going to start by doing a little bit of color correction. I'm just going to take some of the red out. Obviously she was a little bit cold because it was the middle of winter and she's out there in like a very flimsy shirt. So the way I like to fix my color is I go to Image, Adjustments, Selective Color, and then I click Reds and I just bring the magenta down a little bit. So she's looking a bit too yellow there. So there. I think I'm happy with that. So this is the difference. It's very minute, but it just takes some of the red out of her face so that she doesn't look quite as red. I'm going to click OK. Alright, so now I'm going to use, the first thing I do is actually do the skin retouching. I think everyone does this differently, but I just like how the image looks polished right away when you retouch the skin first, so that's what I like to do. So I actually have an action that I use called frequency separation, but that's not going to help you guys very much because if you don't know how to do frequency separation, you're not going to have an action yet. So I'll probably, if I put this on Etsy or something, I'll leave a link down in the bottom bar below where you can buy it. It'll be super cheap or something. But for now, I'm just going to show you how I do it from scratch. So the first thing you want to do is duplicate your layer twice. I'm going to call one high frequency, and I'm going to call the second one low frequency. Whoop, and I'm going to try and spell it right. Okay, and then I'm just going to make sure low is below high. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn off the high frequency layer, just a little eye right here, turn that off for a second. And for the low layer, what we're going to do is we're going to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. And I know Gaussian blur is horrible when you use it alone. That's how you get the plastic colored skin, but bear with me, guys. It's not going to look like this. So you want, it'll depend on your image a little bit. You want to blur it to the point where the colors sort of start blurring together. So for example, here you don't get a lot of blur in the colors. Here you're not seeing so many distinctive spots where the colors are separate. So you kind of want to blur it a little bit. I would say around 7. When I first opened it, I was happy with that. So I'm going to click OK. And then on the high frequency, I'm going to reselect that. It goes back to looking exactly how it was. And I'm going to go Image. Oh, my mouse is being a bit weird. Apply Image. And you're going to want to click the low frequency layer. So that was the layer we were just fiddling with before. You want to click so that we're on that layer. You want to go blending mode, should be add. So click onto that. You're going to want to click invert, and it makes it kind of gray. And then you're going to want to make sure the scale is 2, the offset is 0, and these are not clicked on. And then you're just going to click OK. And then you're going to change the blending mode on this layer to linear light. Sorry, linear light. Okay, so then it looks exactly like it did before, which is exactly what we want. I like to make these into a new group, so group from layers, and I call it frequency separation. And click OK. All right, so these are the layers you're going to want to play with. It's all set up. So just a little bit about what each layer does. The low frequency, sometimes I call it color. You use a healing brush to sort of blend the colors together anywhere that the color needs correcting. So places like here where you can see a difference in the color of her nose, things like under the eyes, the shadows kind of in here, that kind of thing. So it just evens out the color on the low frequency layer. And then the high frequency layer, sometimes I rename it to texture because that's essentially what it does. It has to do with the texture. So you're separating the color and the texture from each other. So where I like to use texture is things like little imperfections in the skin. She has amazing skin, so we're not going to be doing too much here, but like little parts here, like little lines, things like that, like the little bits under her eyes, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what each layer does. So I start with color, and I click on my healing brush tool, and I zoom in nice and close, and I just start alt-clicking. So to alt-click, you select your source, and then you just kind of blend them together by dragging like this. And it takes a little bit of time, and it takes some patience. And it doesn't look like you're doing much at the time, but when you zoom out, you realize that it actually makes quite a big difference. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the areas that I think need to be cleaned. And this is kind of boring, I know, to watch, but When I first started out, I hated when people would fast forward to this part because I wanted to see what they were doing because I didn't really get it yet. So I'm going to leave it in real time. If you want to jump ahead, I'll leave a little, maybe a link where you can jump ahead to where I stopped doing this. But the first time I did this, I didn't have a mouse that worked. I did it all on my trackpad. And it took me forever. So I would definitely suggest getting your mouse if you're not already using one. Some people have the little tablets, which apparently are amazing, but um, this is not, like, photography is not really my full-time job or anything, so I haven't invested in one of those yet. So just to show you the difference, for those of you who are impatient like me. So it looks like I've done nothing, but that's actually the difference. So you can see here and here, I've definitely smoothed out the color a little bit and made it a little more uniform. Still have lots of work to go, but I just wanted to show you the difference really quickly so you can see that we're actually getting somewhere. If you go over an area and you realize that it's not really changing at all, it's probably because it has to do with texture instead of color. So just leave it and we'll come back to it on the texture layer. You can toggle back and forth between them, but sometimes I find that I get mixed up for which one I'm on, and I'll start doing a lot of work in the texture layer and I'll zoom out and I'll realize it looks really plasticky because I've been on the wrong layer. So I like to do them separately. And I like to leave out, like, things like freckles. I'm not going to touch that. Some people might, if you're doing high-end beauty retouching, maybe you want to. But I don't like to change the way people look too much. Just sort of improve. I think with such high-quality cameras, you kind of enhance people's flaws because you're getting so much detail. So I just kind of like to bring it back to what it would look like in person, and then that's where I like to stop. And sometimes you do something and you don't like it, which is where your history tool comes in. If I didn't like what I did, I can go back in time sort of and fix it. Okay, I'm just going to fix this area here around her eyeshadow. This is kind of where it gets tricky because you're into the really, really tiny details. So feel free to zoom in as much as you want and change your brush size. Okay, so again, that's the difference. It's not massive, but it just sort of smooths out the coloring in her face and makes it a little smoother. So now I'm going to go into the high frequency layer, and I actually like to use the clone tool for this. I find it a little bit more realistic. It doesn't give you that plastic blurry effect. So I'm going to reduce my brush size. And same idea here, so you alt-click to select the source, and then click to fix it. And you don't want to kind of drag on this layer. The color layer you can sort of drag and be really forgiving with the clicking, but this one I think is a little more particular. So I'm just going to go in and take out little small imperfections like that. If you have a large area to do, you can always switch back over to the healing brush tool if you like. I like to be a bit conservative at this stage, and then you can always build, but it's harder to take away. And it's on this layer that you would want to take out stray hairs. Doesn't really matter with this one because it's not really close enough in that you would really see. But okay. And it's good to zoom out quite often when you're working on this layer because you can get carried away pretty easily. Just tidying up some of her eyebrows. Okay. So you can see the difference there. Again, not massive. I'm not trying to change her entire face shape. The only thing I want to fix more is in here and maybe right here. So I'm going to go back to the color layer. That's a bit better. Okay, so pretty much happy with that. There's the difference there, so just evens out everything a little bit, but she doesn't look fake. So I'm happy with the frequency separation there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and fix up the eyes. Well, actually, maybe I'll do that last. Maybe I'll do the contours first. So sometimes I like to add a little bit of contour back into the face. So what I do, I actually merge these layers down. I always make sure I have a PSD of the basic unedited file saved, so that if I want to re-edit it later, I have that saved. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge those guys. Just makes it a lot easier to fix other things because you don't have a million layers going. You can totally not merge them if you don't like that. Totally fine. Don't merge them and continue on. So I'm going to rename this layer Contour. And I'm going to select my brush tool. And I like to do highlights first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of select a highlighted area. Oh, I don't want that. Highlighted area. Make it a little bit lighter. Press OK. And then my opacity is going to be really low. It's going to be about 2%. And I'm just going to go and touch over the parts where the light would naturally hit. So a little bit. Her nose is already nicely highlighted, so just going to extend that up a little bit. And then her cheeks. Try not to go too crazy on areas like this that are naturally under shadow, because then it looks a bit fake. So just follow the natural shape of her face. So it doesn't look like it makes a big difference, but when you toggle it on and off, you can see that it actually has made a bit of a difference. So you can always turn the opacity down. So if you think it looks a little much, just turn the entire layer opacity down. So there we go. Then I'm going to take my color selection tool and I'm going to select a darker area. Make it a bit darker. And do the same thing for the contoured parts. You can start a new layer if you want, if you're scared that you're going to mess it up, but I actually am kind of lazy, so I'm just going to do it on one layer. Sometimes I find if you want to change the mode to darken, helps a little bit. I don't like to go too crazy with this because I just find sometimes it looks a bit like their face is dirty if you do it wrong. And I like to sort of use a minimalist approach with this kind of thing. So it just brings a little bit of dimension back into her face. You can see that a little bit there. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm going to just fix up the little parts around her eyes where you can kind of see her false lashes. So I'm going to duplicate that layer and go eyes. Okay, and then I'm going to select the burn tool. So burn tool just sort of burns the area and makes it darker. I'm going to select highlights and I'm going to click on the areas where you can see a little bit of lightness from the eyelash glue. So here as well, you can kind of see where her eyelashes are stuck on, which you couldn't in real life. It's just that, you know, we use cameras that are so good quality that it picks up on these little details. Okay, so there's before and there's after. Just tidies it up a little bit. Nothing super crazy. And I'm going to move on to the next one. This one's a little bit worse for that. You can really see here. I'm going to go back to highlights. And when you no longer get result from the highlight selection, you can move the range to midtones. I just like to start off with highlights because it sort of isolates the really light parts. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Just sort of darkens up that area and makes it less obvious that she has falsies on. So we'll zoom in and show you the difference. This looks quite a bit tidier. So I'm still a little bit concerned with this little bit right here. So I'm just going to take my clone stamp. Okay, that's better. And while I'm still on the eye layer, I just kind of want to increase these highlights in here. So I'm going to go to the dodge tool. And my exposure dodge should be quite low, and it's set to highlights the range. And I'm just going to sort of click over these light parts to bring them out a little bit more. And this is me. You can actually see me standing here. And just sort of going on the mid-tone range to bring back the color of her eyes a little bit. She has brown eyes, not black eyes. A reflector would have been nice here to bounce some light back into her eyes, but it was just me. I didn't have anyone helping on this shoot. It was just sort of a test. So do what we can. I don't really think Photoshop is a replacement for reflectors or anything like that, but sometimes you just don't have 8 arms. And you don't want to make it look too unnatural here. But there's the difference. Alright, so I think in the original picture I probably went a little bit further with the retouching, but just for the sake of making this video a little bit shorter, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to move on to the color correction. So if you're not happy at this stage with your photo, just keep working at it until you're happy. And don't forget arms and chest as well. She has really nice skin on both her arms and her chest. No like scratches or marks or anything, so I don't really have to do anything there, but sometimes the face and the neck don't quite match, so you might have a little bit of work there. And I would do that back when you're in the frequency separation, but you can always do a new frequency separation, like merge these together and do a new frequency separation. So next I'm going to work on the curves. So I'm going to click on the curves button. And the curve I used here, I'll have to go back and check. It was carousel, and it was at 64%. I spend a lot of my time playing with curves. I've downloaded them from various places. Julia Trodi is one of my favorite curves people. You can get some of the free ones from her site, or you can buy them. So I like to just play around with curves and see which ones I like, but obviously I've already selected this one, so I think I had it at 64. I like that. It just sort of makes it a little more wintry without being too yellow or anything. Okay, so let's see the comparison. Yeah, so I think I went a little bit more into the eyes here in the original one, but I'm okay with that. So the next thing I like to do is sharpen everything. So I actually have an action, again, a sharpen action that I run, but you can go to select the top layer, filter. Okay, so my next step is to sharpen the final image. If your image is really sharp, then you don't have to do this. It's kind of optional, but so I'm going to go to filter, other, high pass. Actually, sorry, cancel that. I'm going to duplicate this layer. Sharpen. Okay, then I'm going to go to filter, other, high pass. So sharpen kind of just sharpens the edges around the shape, and you can see when you select preview what it's going to do. So I don't want to go too crazy. So I'm going to go about 2, maybe about 3. And then you change the layer to overlay. And so this is the difference. So not a huge one because I think it looks quite fake when you go too overboard. If it's too sharp for you, you can always bring the opacity down. So I'm going to leave it about there because if I go too far, it starts to look a little bit unflattering in the pore area. So I'm going to go there. So the last thing I do with my photos, so I have everything sort of how I want it. The coloring is fine. I've sharpened it. So the last thing I do would be to watermark and copyright it. So I like to copyright right in the image. So you go to File, File Info, Description, and then right in here you can copyright it. So your copyright status. (2016). Okay. And then you can import your watermark to watermark it. So everyone does this differently. Basically, I like to change the colors around, so I'll just import it there. drag and drop it, and then make the opacity a little bit less. If this is too small, you can resize your image first and then drag and drop your watermark in there. It just kind of depends what you're using them for. I generally save a copy edited for print purposes with no watermark, and then I'll resize it to web size, and then I'll watermark the web size version. So to resize your image, you go to image, image size, and I usually do 1000 as my width. For web purposes, it makes it a little easier to send to people. I've actually changed my watermark since I originally edited this photo a few months back, actually. So yeah, my watermark has changed. So this is the final version of the photo. So if you want to see the original difference, you can go all the way back. So there was the before, and there's the after. So there you have it. That's how I edit a basic natural light portrait in Photoshop, right from the beginning through to the end. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.